Welcome to Intralogistics Insiders, brought to you by Sinaos. Explore the latest trends, challenges, and innovations in intralogistics with industry experts. Welcome to another episode of Intralogistics Insiders. We have today Simon Houghton, Director of Sales Northern Europe at Geek. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
So can you tell us a little bit, how did you ended up in intralogistics?
Well, long story. I think probably personal experience. I ran my own business, distribution business, distributing tech products for 15, 16 years. And of course, when you're running your own business, it's sleeves rolled up. You're doing a lot of the logistics work yourself. You're driving the forklifts, you're preparing the orders, managing the logistics in and out. And I think that was the base of my experience.
How long ago was that?
Roughly, between 2000, 2015. So yeah, coming up for 10 years ago.
What was the state of automation at that time?
Not very much. Not very much. I mean, the automation we had on site was probably a robot pallet wrapper, and that was it. So I could see lots of areas where lots of touches, lots of parts of the warehouse which are inefficient. So I could see that, but I don't think we were big enough at that time as a company to deploy automation.
How big was the company in terms of revenue?
Revenues up to 10 million euros a year. So we were big enough, but at the time, automation at that time was for companies doing 10, 20 times that. So, you'd be looking at investing, significant amounts of money to put any automation systems. So since then, a lot has changed, which we know about. So
how was managing like a 10 million distribution business with only manual labor?
It was tough. I'd say on the peak days, the whole office was down in the warehouse and packing and wrapping pallets and then lots of that sort of things. But you had to be done, at the end of the day. So even as owner and runner of my own business, I'd be quite happy to drive a forklift and get orders out the door if necessary. But yeah, it was tough. So definitely good fun, but good experience to base my knowledge on the industry on.
And then you went from managing your own distribution business to sales.
Yep.
How was that transition?
I think I've always had sales at a core, which is the reason we built up the business. You're always selling. You're building up. You're selling your business. You're selling your products. I've always enjoyed tech products of some sort. So I realized that there was the growth in logistics. Was especially with e-com growing and everything else, there was a huge potential there. I moved into working for large systems integrators, selling automation, and through that saw opportunities for robotics. So I think that gradually stirred my interest with always being interested in tech. And of course, I saw a huge opportunity in robotics, which brings us forward to where we are now.
So in your current position at Geek Plus, can you tell us a little bit more about Geek Plus and what it's offering?
Yeah, I mean, Geek Plus, we are manufacturers, global manufacturers of AMRs, autonomous mobile robots, and we offer a number of solutions to solve some of the problems in the warehouse environment, or typically any warehouse usually needs a lot of people to pick, store, and pack orders, whether it's business to business, business to consumer, and essentially a lot of those processes within the warehouse are repetitive, non-skilled. Typically 50% of an operator's time in a manual environment is spent in transit, so they're walking around. That's dead time. So if you can get the robots to do the running, that's essentially where we fit in. If essentially Geek Plus provides a number of robotic solutions to do the movement of the material handling of those goods in the warehouse environment. And that could be anything from inbound to the storage to the picking, right the way through to post-pick sortation and outbound from there. So lots of solutions, lots of ideas, and that's the interesting part of the market now.
What was the first successful product from Geek Plus?
First successful project. I mean, we Geek Plus as a business started 10 years ago. We've had our 10th anniversary now. I think I align us to very much a tech-based business, so the growth is extremely accelerated. You look at the Googles of this world and things, and we've certainly grown in a similar way. I think the first big projects, most of them were in China. We started our own, to help sell the solutions. We set up our own warehouses, fulfillment warehouses. We got 4 in China. and used those to show our technology and won projects from there. And some of those warehouses are still going. We don't plan to open anymore, but so that was probably the first successes. Back in 2018, 2019, they decided to expand to the international market. So this is when I came in. I joined for the UK region, and probably the first successes we had in Europe, some major UK retailers, fashion retailers. I don't know whether we can say the name, or maybe not. I don't know. But I mean, Next was a big one. So Next in the UK. If anyone knows about Next as a business, they have been investing in automation within the warehouse space for the last at least 30 years. They're one of the forerunners in automation, and every single toy in the automation toy box, they've probably got it on site. And now, if you look at their business, they have one of the lowest logistics costs in the business. So we were the first AMR suppliers to work with Next. Started negotiations back in 2018. We've now got sites with getting on over for 500 robots, and it's a continuous relationship there. So that was probably one of the biggest successes in the European market. Since then, I mean, it's grown massively since then. We've got lots of major European and UK retailers now working with us. To say a few names: Tesco, Marks and Spencer's, THG, Dr. Max. Many names. I think we have over 700 customers globally, 40 countries. So good success so far.
What do you think are the markets or the industries that have the biggest chance or the biggest opportunities to disrupt its competition through automation?
I think if the COO or the operations director has a forward-thinking view, I mean, certainly the biggest challenge any company with a warehouse has is people. And you hear the stories that robots are replacing people and it's going to affect jobs. The challenge is most sites have problems finding people to work in warehouses. People don't want to work in a warehouse. The images of a dark warehouse and having to walk 20 miles a day, 20 kilometers a day on your own, unsafe, have possible accidents, is not what a lot of people want to do. So very, very few people actually want to work in these places as they are. If you get the robots to do running around, as I said before, then the working environment changes. You're in one spot, the robots are bringing the goods to you. Normally those areas are all together, so you're with colleagues. It's light, there's heat, and there's cooling, and there's radio, and there's a nice place to work. Also, it's a cool place to work with robots running around after you. So I think that's the biggest change. So challenges, definitely people, rising costs. I mean, at the moment, any warehouse or any manufacturing business even where you perhaps require more than 10 or 15 people to move items around, that's an opportunity to put in an AMR system because they can do the running around for you.
When you go to trade shows and you see companies advertising AMRs, what I see a lot of times is it looks like they are more intended for small applications or to automate single processes.
Yeah.
Then when you see an application that is run by Geek Plus, you see it's like a completely different scale.
Yeah. So the big, the traditional AGV, as we would call it, a lot of those manufacturers their robot management system, their fleet management systems would top out around about 10 robots. Anything over that, they struggle. It's like traffic management. You're managing lots of moving things and their software just can't cope with that. Geek Plus now, we've got tests, I think up to over 5,000 robots in one site you can run. So the algorithms and the software needed to do that's Geek Plus's biggest strength, I guess. And, managing those large fleets of robots on a large site is, and the scalability, so you can start small and roll all the way across, then that's probably the big difference. On the face of it, an AMR looks very similar. It's moving along the ground, but the reality is when the robot management system behind that is probably the most important things. And that's the sort of thing you need to look for with any AMR supplier.
Many people think when they say AMRs, it means that it's a robot that can move autonomously and that a lot of times it has obstacle avoidance.
Mm-hmm.
But this also involves a lot of issues because it's not following, the path that was designed for, and that can lead to trouble. So how is Geek Plus solving that?
So traditionally, you've got two forms of navigation. You use SLAM navigation and typically QR code-based navigation. So the QR code-based navigations are normally behind a fence. Those robots run much faster because it is an enclosed environment. SLAM navigation is the typical, like your robot vacuum cleaner and your lawnmower and things. They're running around constantly scanning, avoiding obstacles, yes, but much, much slower. So you think of some warehousing sites where they need to pick hundreds or possibly hundreds of thousands of orders in a day. You don't want something which is slow. You need something which can move quick and move efficiently. So they're the two differences. I think what's happening now and what we're seeing the trends are is there's an amalgamation of the two. So one of Geek Plus's partners is Intel. We're working on technological VSLAM. So that's getting the benefits of all of the speed of the QR code system, but also having the ability to use the SLAM style of navigation. The key thing with SLAM is it can work amongst people. So it's detecting people around and it can avoid obstacles, whereas you don't need to enclose that environment off. So that's the future. Long-term future could be the elimination of QR codes altogether, which is, if you're looking at it, sticking on hundreds of thousands of QR codes on the floor. One, it's a complex job to do it properly in a warehouse environment. Two, you've got to clean them. They need cleaning. Obviously, if the robots have the intelligence now, if the two or three come unstuck or are dirty, they can still work. So they can still navigate. But obviously, if there's 20 out in one area, then you're going to need to re-stick those down. So that's one of the challenges. But the future is definitely going towards no QR codes.
Okay. We're talking about hardware, software. Where do you see, where is the biggest opportunity for innovation in mobile robotics, in automation of warehouses? Is it about software or hardware?
Certainly from a solution innovation, we're seeing goods to person solutions are the biggest change a company can make. That's where most of your people are deployed. So if you are picking manually, that's a change going to need to make, because your competitor will be looking at putting in a full goods to person system, and typically you can run an operation on 80, even 90% less heads with a full goods to person solution versus a manual operation. So if you think the costs related to that, if you've got 100 people and you reduce it down to 10, 15 people, the cost saved every year makes your business much more competitive. So that's, I see from a solution innovation side of things. Technically, I say goods to person is the key. There are now solutions for every type of storage. So from a pallet to a case to piece picking, from a goods to person side. And then if you think of the upstream and downstream activities, so maybe getting the goods to the storage area, and then once they've been picked, getting them to the pack area, and once they've been packed, then getting them to the dispatch area. All of these are movements within the warehouse, and potentially you can automate that. The final piece, I guess, is the picking station. You can then start to add on robotic arms to the picking, potentially. So you're eliminating the need for a picker altogether, because the robots can do the picking and placing into a box or a tote and so on. I was in China last week, and the latest buzzword is humanoid robots as well. That's possibly where we're going next, where they can do even more tasks. But
I've seen some videos of Amazon using some agility robotics humanoid robot.
Yeah.
Does Geek Plus have something in mind, or is testing
watch
something?
This space? Never say never. I can't say too much, but yeah, there's. I mean, I since I've been at Geek Plus 6 years now, every 3 months we've always got something new. So yeah, fast forward a year and we might be talking even different things again, but we'll see.
I was discussing with an engineer recently. An AMR on HB in terms of hardware is quite a simple device. Someone would say that a graduate student will be able to build one if he had some time. So I'm going back. What makes really the difference? Is it the hardware, or is it the software that is integrating all devices?
Both. I mean, the hardware has to perform well. I mean, I think mechanical hardware now, we have over 1,600 patents. So I think if you look inside the robot, it doesn't look that complex, but things like the suspension, when it's moving a 1-ton shelf, 2.8, over 3 meters high, you need to have a good running gear effectively. So, but also software is a huge part, and the experience in software. I mentioned before about running large fleets, but it's inventory management system, managing where to store products, heat maps, mapping product distribution for rotation. So ideally in a warehouse, you want your fast moving goods to be as close to the pickers as possible. Now that could be changing throughout the season. So, essentially now on using software, you can move the stock around and you can dynamically slot it. So it's always available on the right pallet or the right shelf at any one time. And so I think that's the future. A bit of both, I would say, to that question.
Okay, tricky question now. In Northern Europe, there is a very well-known system, which is like very dense in terms of storage, uses like a cube system with no alleys. For some, they may think that it's the highest density storage available. But I've realized visiting and knowing people that it's not always the best solution. So my question is in regards to when choose Geek Plus, when it's the best solution and when maybe another one is the best solution?
I think a great question. I know the solution very well and have a lot of respect for that solution. It makes a lot of sense and it's the most dense storage you can potentially have. I think not all businesses are what they're storing is as clean cut as that. So you may have 60% of your items which you can put in a tote, but you may have another 40% which you can't. So I think that's when if you look at an AMR supplier like Geek, who has hybrid solutions, and we have a number of sites now where you can combine a shelf to person and a tote to person system in the same area, and you can consolidate the goods in the same stations. And I think that's probably an area which is a big point of difference. Other factors, it depends on the profile of the orders as well. So if you think of a big block and you're digging down, picking the top 2 bins is always good. So they're your fast movers. But if the demand is spread over a wider range of SKUs and not those, say, top 20%, that's when you're going to have problems, because if having to dig down to the bottom quite regularly, then your productivity rate drops significantly. So having access to those SKUs is important. It really depends on analysis of the profile of the business. Some businesses work really well for that solution, and we can't compete with, if it's a perfect fit for the business and they want the maximum storage, then it's the right solution. But in a lot of cases, it's not the case.
So at the end of the day, what do CEOs, for example, need to do to know what is the right solution? And if it makes sense to automate? Yeah.
Obviously, talk to automation providers. I think a good start, especially if you've got a large and complex business, is to work perhaps with a consultant beforehand who can spend some time on site on the business. But that be it, the consultant needs to be aware of all of the latest technologies. So there are some great consultants out there, and there are others who perhaps their only knowledge of solutions out there is the old school traditional automation. That's another thing which obviously is the wrong way to go, because all they'll end up doing is recommending a system which will cost 10 times the cost it needs to happen. So I think good consultancy work, not only to understand the right solution for the business, but also to extract the right data. So when we get the data, when we're looking at a solution, qualified data is a lot better than less qualified data, I suppose. And without doing that, all you'll end up doing is going through a design process and then halfway through realizing you've got the wrong data and the wrong solution. So I think that process is quite important.
From your experience, what's the average return on investment for an automation solution like yours?
Within Europe, we're seeing less than 2 years on many, many occasions. So sometimes, less than a year in some cases. But 1 to 2 years is typical now with the current salary rates. Certainly across most of Northern Europe, we're seeing less than 2 years.
What about Southern Europe?
2 to 3, maybe. Again, depends on the area, but and the business. Some businesses are more efficient than others. Some you can see a return less than 2 years. Again, others perhaps have got a few more systems in place that could be less. But typically, everywhere less than 3 years, but the majority of Europe less than 2.
Looks like a big change for a warehouse to go for automation.
Mm-hmm.
How does that affect the current operations of the company?
So we've installed in many sites alongside the current operations. So we'll work with perhaps some system integrators. So if there's conveyors and things in place, they can assist us to either divert those conveyors, remove those conveyors, and so on. As long as the right plan is in place at the start, you can still run your business alongside. The other area, what some businesses do is run a proof of concept. So you can put in a smaller robotic solution to try it, to prove it in a small corner of the warehouse. And once that's proven, then you expand it. The great thing with AMR solutions is they're so scalable and so flexible. So you don't need to change everything overnight. You can do it in many stages. You can do it in a lot of phases. In traditional automation, which I've worked in the past, typically the maximum number of phases you could do an automation solution was 2. One would be to cover you up to 5 years, and then the phase 2 will be 5 to 10. On an AMR solution, you could do every 12 months if necessary, quite easily. So that's the difference.
Were there any struggles during the electronic components shortage?
No, strangely enough, no, we didn't have any issues on any deliveries of anything. I think the only big challenge we've had over the last few years was the shipping crisis. So when container prices were 5 times more, that was causing problems when you've quoted a project and suddenly you have to say, oh, actually, it's a few 100,000 more in shipping. But that was the only issue we've had.
Okay. What about security? How do you when you're automating so much and putting so much into software hands, how do you keep your warehouse secure?
So certainly the Geek systems are separate servers on premise. They're ring fenced within their own network, and the only connection is an API connection with the host system for orders and so on. So we're not seeing things like customer data or anything like that. All it is giving us missions effectively to go and pick these goods, and we're sending messages back to say we've picked the goods, but there's no core data being held in any of the Geek systems. And I say those servers are completely separate within a separate network within the site, so it's pretty secure. And as I say, we're working with most of the major well-known retailers now in Europe and the UK. We've worked with their IT teams, and they can guarantee our systems are secure.
This podcast is brought to you by Synaos, the all-in-one intralogistics platform, orchestrating material flows with mobile robots, forklifts, and people to overcome cost pressures and skilled worker shortages. Visit synaos.com to learn more. So I will jump down into some quick questions. Okay. Will robots ever completely replace human workers?
No, definitely not. I think you always need a human element to work with robots, to help program, to help maintain. Definitely. I think the difference is the operators who are familiar with robots, the level of their work will go up. So they'll be a more qualified, more technical position rather than a non-skilled position. So you'll see more and more skilled positions coming through.
Is the impact of AI and robotics into intralogistics living up to the hype, or are we still waiting to see the real breakthroughs that will come?
I think it is. I think that what we're seeing is only scratching the surface. There are so many warehouses out there which still use manual process, which could be automated, and they're continued. We're seeing now, because of the accessibility and the low cost entry for robotic solutions, that small to medium-sized enterprises can also look at robotic solutions as well. And we've got lots of cases of smaller businesses putting in robotic systems, and their competitivity against their much larger competitors changes overnight, and they become, and it's a lot of companies are using it for marketing as well. So it's definitely, we're only scratching the surface of the potential coming through. As say, a lot of the the first stage is perhaps looking at full goods-to-person systems for AMRs, but then there's so many complementary systems to help that towards a smart warehouse. Certainly UK and Europe, there are very few smart warehouses, fully smart warehouses. There's a few major names which we talked about, which you could say are fully smart, but most are not. And most are running so many inefficient processes that the future is good for us, I hope. But you look at all of the processes within the warehouse environment, there's so many which could be automated. And we always recommend when we're looking at a site is to look at those upstream and downstream activities outside Geek, the Geek system as well. So packing, if you're still manually packing, you might be able to get 6 times more orders out of the door with a Geek system, but if your packing is still manual, that's going to be a bottleneck. So start to look at the automation of things like that as well. So it's taking a holistic view of the whole processes within the warehouse and then looking at how you can automate it in stages. So you're not going to do it overnight, but looking at how you can complement each stage and maybe having start to think about a 5 or a 10-year plan for automation. I think that's the way forward.
Some people is afraid to say that we're going to get rid of jobs at warehouses with automation, but let's look at it from a different perspective. What will happen to those companies that don't automate?
They'll close or significantly reduce in size, 100%. We're seeing it now, and from a consumer expectation, we're all thinking about B2C. We're all sitting at home and wanting to order goods, and we want them to become next day, to be delivered next day, sometimes same day. I was out in Asia last week and you can get goods delivered within the hour from pretty much anything. So Europe, next day is the norm, but not necessarily in every company. Sometimes it's 2-3 day service. So as a consumer, you want something quickly, typically. Who are you going to go to? You're going to go to the company who can get it to you next day, or you're going to go to the company who's 3 or 4 days? It's pretty obvious, the answer. So I think if you don't do that, you will lose business. Also, for a fact that in ever rising costs, if you to run a warehouse is expensive with people, light, full automation, goods to person systems can run with no light. They don't need heat. Robots can run from 0 degrees. Some will work in a frozen environment. So massive cost savings, and if you're not a business looking at controlling those costs and managing those costs and becoming more efficient to give a better service for your end customers, then you will struggle going forward.
What do you see as the biggest innovations we will see in warehouse automation in the next 5 years?
I think it's just enhancements of that whole goods to person side of things. So all of the movements of stock, because stock has to be moved. If you think of the supply chain process, the goods are manufactured, they're shipped to maybe a regional or a national distribution center. That's maybe shipped again to local distribution centers. And within all of that, there's touches happening for the picking of those orders. And as you go down the scale, you go from pallet picking to case picking to piece picking. All of those require processes. So I think in every single storage facility, warehouse, you've got to be looking at automating some of those processes going forward.
Lights out warehouses, so fully automatic warehouses. Do you think it's inevitable, or maybe it's fantasy?
Depends on the size and scale of the operation. Obviously, fully automating a warehouse is expensive. Not as expensive as it used to be, but certainly a large volume. Again, you're always looking at the return on investment. So if you've got a big storage facility which is receiving a few pallets a day in and out, the company might be large and overall turnover, but if you only need 1 or 2 people to manage that, and the facility is existing, so it's a brownfield site, then the reason to automate that may not be the right one now. Whereas if you've got another site which is processing hundreds of pallets a day or thousands of pallets a day in and out, and you're doing case picking from those, for example, then that would be the first priority, because you might have, I've been to sites where they've had over 500 people on a shift, multiple levels. And just with an initial study, we were getting that down to sort of 40 or 50 people using using robotics, AMR, goods-to-person solutions. So they're obviously the priority sites. But again, on any site, look at the processes, look at the amount of people. When I'm walking around a site, I'm looking for people. So I'm seeing lots of people all running around doing a particular process. That's typically the place I would look to start. If it's one person floating around one floor and there's so low volume of orders, you're not typically going to get the payback.
What are we going to do as a society if we, get rid of people working in automation? AI will get rid of journalists, of, marketing people, office workers.
I think it's an ever adapting world. If you look at the history of industrial revolutions, the human race has adapted, and the challenge is right now in most warehouse environments, as I said, most people don't want to work in those environments. It's not a nice place to work. So if you change that and you get the robots doing the tasks which we as humans don't want to do, then we dedicate to other things. And as I say, there's new jobs being created. I mean, within Geek Plus ourselves, we're creating jobs for system engineers and mechanical engineers and project managers and anyone using robotics. And in the world of AI, there's new job opportunities. So I think that's probably the shift. Say if there was lots of people, their dream job was working in a warehouse picking, then maybe we have more of a problem, but we don't. And certainly large conurbation population areas where there's warehouses competing for work. I'm hearing of people being shipped in 100 miles on a coach to work in a warehouse, temporary workers. And those guys are temporary. They only want to do the work for 3 weeks, and then they go off and they were looking for a better job afterwards. So it's a real challenge, I think, for any operation, finding people to work in those environments. So if you can look for solutions where you don't necessarily need those people at the time, then you can use robots to do the menial tasks. I think you see the same in the hospitality and catering industry now. People working perhaps as washing dishes and things. There's less. It's harder and harder to get, and if you do get them, you're having to pay more and more salary to it. So can you automate those processes? I think you can in a lot of cases.
Do you sense we are in an automation arms race? And if you feel it, and also what will separate the winners from the losers?
Yeah, I think businesses have to consider automation of some sort. I think thinking old school, fully manual, will suffer in the long run. So yeah, I think there is. If you look at, I was in some hotels in Asia recently, and you've got robot room service, and the robots will drive into a lift and send you a text on your phone when your takeaway order is there, and they open the flap, and things like that. So there's lots of processes which I think will come. It enhances the experience of the user as well as consumers, things like that. But yeah, you have to embrace it 100%. I think for costs, for business sense, for just improving your profitability of your own business, the efficiency, growing your business, then if you don't consider automation, then I think that's a real challenge, definitely.
Do you think in the future we will see like a one-size-fits-all automation solution for warehouses, or is it going to be, different specialized companies that are more focused on different parts of the process?
One-stop shop helps. We're seeing more and more hybrid types of solutions. So, a lot of businesses are what I would call omni-channel. So they're maybe distributing to business and also business to consumer. So that's a completely different style of picking and a completely different style. Can you have a hybrid system? Yes, you can now. Whereas maybe in the past, the system had to be designed one type of business and it was fixed and it couldn't change and it couldn't flex. So I think that's the difference going forward.
Is there a common belief or best practice in logistics that you passionately disagree with?
I think, and this will resonate with some companies, I think perhaps there's certain individuals who are against change, and I think they can restrict the change in the business. So there's a lot of deliberation. I think comparing maybe the Western European market with Asian market is a lot more, let's just do it. Let's do it and do it quickly. And this thing of deliberating and reviewing and shall we do it? Shan't we do it? And suddenly a year's passed, another year's passed. Whereas your competitors, somebody in your competitors may be thinking, well, we'll do it now. And when you're looking at any automation system, even AMRs, it's typically maybe a 6-12 month plan as a minimum to get it on site. So what you're thinking about today may not be installed for another 9 or 12 months. So I think it's perhaps if you look at the operations director or even the COO, and they've got the responsibility to radically change the business, and they don't want to make a mistake. It's the fear of change or fear of missing it. There's a number of factors there. So how do you solve that? I mentioned before, look at maybe a consultant, get them to do the work, get them to take a helicopter view of the business and work out where the areas you can improve, use their experience, and then get that report and then show it to the board. And then you've got a way to say, well, actually, it's not my fault if it goes wrong, I guess. But I think that's a good way. Certainly look at external professional help, because most operations directors, managers are extremely busy. Most larger operations are running 24/7. There's always stuff going on. So you're managing that on a day-to-day basis, lots of firefighting. Having time to step back and look at the whole operation sometimes doesn't happen. And days go on, months pass by, years pass by, and all of a sudden you're operating, all of your competitors have got an automation system running on with say 10 people, and you're running an operation with 100 people. How's your business going to look in a few years? So I think that's probably get some help, look at it, start thinking about it now. Don't think, we'll do it next year or a year after. I look at different businesses, and we're challenged with which markets, which businesses to attract. Any business really, any small business, which small to medium size or large enterprise, which has 10, 15 people on a shift in a warehouse, could be a candidate to automate. Going forward, without that, it's I think you've got to look at it now.
Different regions have different paces for automation. How do you see the difference between Americas, Europe, Asia, and also how do you see the situation in Europe? Because it feels like we are lagging, we're staying behind, and how can we stop getting Europe to be like an amusement park in the future and not a real?
Yeah, good question. Certainly for us, Asia market was the forerunners and the quickest adopters of the technology. Following that, the US. The US is 40% of our business now. The nature of a US distribution center or warehouse is big. Anything US based is big, large areas. So of course, running around those large areas, it's even more. If you can automate that process and get the robots doing the running around, then that's why we've seen huge growth, and we've got some enormous sites in the US. Europe, I would say, depends on the area. Certainly Northern Europe, where salaries are most expensive, there's a bigger demand. But again, the process is slow, and a lot of people perhaps stuck in the past of the only automation options are the really expensive one, traditional automation. I think they've got to get that out of their heads that it's not the case now. And they don't need to radically change their operation overnight. They can do it in parts. Southern Europe, I think, probably a bit too relaxed, I would say, on that. We do see automation in Southern Europe, but again, it's that perhaps the challenges are less because salaries are a bit lower, so it's not the same cost draw on the business, but it will only change. And if you look at the direction of the business, you say sometimes on trends that maybe the UK is, for example, a year behind the US, and maybe Southern Europe could be a year or two behind UK. It'll happen, and start thinking about it now, even if it's not an investment you want to do this year, but thinking about, well, maybe next year or the year after. Getting costs, start studying these concepts. Most robotics companies won't charge you for that. Maybe consultancy, you'll get a charge, but start looking at it now and thinking what your operation could look like in 12, 18 months' time.
When you speak with potential clients, what is the biggest fear or misconception that they have about warehouse automation?
When you've been running day to day, it's that change. It's that because a lot of them are from a full manual environment through to an fully automated environment. It's a big step. And I think that's the fear. A lot of them, we've done it this way and we've got our processes and, this is the way we've always done it. A lot of those processes and the nuances of running that particular business. It's a particular business style and what happens if this type of order comes in. Or if that comes in, we always need to put it to the top of the queue. All of those processes can be carried over to automation. You can carry exactly the same sort of thing, so you don't need to change the way you do business. All you'll do by putting in automation is improve efficiencies, improve accuracies. You'll get more orders out the door with the same team, significant increase. Those orders will be more accurate, so your end customer satisfaction will improve. So there are benefits all the way through. So fear, I would say, should be unfounded. I think you shouldn't have any fear in it. If you're not too sure, run a proof of concept, run a small little test area and prove it to the business. If you're trying to get the buy-in from the board, say, okay, well, let's run a low-risk proof of concept with a robotic solution, and that's where a lot of businesses start. And I can guarantee every single one of those businesses which ran a proof of concept, they're now on to full-scale solutions. Not one has decided not to do it. But that's the way forward, perhaps.
Last but not least, what do you think is the importance of integrators?
Very important. I think what we're seeing now is the size and scale of solutions which we're being looked at aren't just involving AMRs. So you're thinking the upstream and downstream activities, how are you getting the goods to the robotic area? What's happening afterwards? Do you need some conveyors? Do you need some automated packing machines? The great thing with the integrators is that they can not only help do the install of the whole site, they can also maintain that site later on. So, and they can supply all of the other equipment, the complementary equipment. And that could be packing machine today, but it could be a robotic arm picking system tomorrow. So integrators is really, really important. And Geek as a business it's the majority of our focus of projects will be delivered with an integrator going forward for the rest of the year.
Simon, it was a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for being here and hope to see you soon.
Great pleasure.
Nice
Good to see you.
Thanks for listening to Intralogistics Insiders. Stay tuned for more insights and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite platform.